boy. Again, more breaking news. Also, a second attempt at peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia has ended with no deal. Both Ukrainian and Russian delegations did, however, agree to organize humanitarian corridors to allow civilians to flee the war-torn country. However, no progress has been made in ending the war now in its 8th day. This afternoon, President Vladimir Putin emerged from his lair to give televised remarks and said, quote, Russian operations in Ukraine are in fact going according to plan, saying, quote, all the tasks that have been set are being successfully resolved. This as the country's 40-mile tank convoy has stalled about 19 miles outside of the capital city of Kiev, run out of fuel and food for the troops. And as fighting intensifies in Kiev and Kharkiv, the West awaits potential retaliatory moves from Russia following devastating sanctions on the country's economy. We bring in former NSA director and God of success. Let's turn to the cybersecurity piece of this. I have more people asking me on a daily basis, Liz, do you think that Putin is going to turn off the lights here in the United States and we will go dark? He will hit our grid. What say you?
Well, I think he's going to attack our country in cyber. I don't know that he can take down the grid. I think he will attack the government, the energy sector, oil and gas, the finance sector, and he will use his forces, primarily the SVR and the GRU, to go after the government side and use his illicit force. Think of that as your ransomware teams, your hacker army, to go after our critical infrastructure.
Do we fight back then? Is that when we get involved? Because we had the NATO Deputy General Secretary General Mirsha Joanna on last week, and he said that a cyber attack on the United States is equivalent to an act of war.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what that cyber attack accomplishes. In my mind, an attack that he designs that impacts human life should be considered an act of war. Now, this is an issue that the administration and Congress have to deal with, and NATO. I don't think it's fully resolved through NATO, and all the NATO countries yet agree. But in this light, you're seeing cyber as an element of national power. And that brings you right up.
We look at the financial world, and Charlie Gasparino had reported yesterday that they've been investing for years to protect their systems, and they're doing a pretty good job of it. Who is much more vulnerable? Which sectors?
Well, I think the healthcare and the education sectors, they're the ones that have been getting hit the most, along with your small, mid-sized businesses. You know, when you look at ransomware companies like Conti making over $2 billion in ransomware, that means they've hit over 4,000 companies that have paid them money. And they're going after education, they're going after healthcare, they're going after the small businesses across all the sectors. That's where it is right now. But what we're talking about here is a nation-state campaign to take on another country in cyber. I think Putin has to do something to break the will of Europe and the United States in the sanction regime. And I think he's going to use cyber to do it. I think anything else would be too costly. I think it will backfire on him. I think our country is really prepared in terms of the offense, what we have with the Defense Department, DHS, and at the national level with Chris Inglis up there. I think the public-private partnership is growing. It's not where it needs to be. And that's part of our journey. We've got to create that collective defense, in my opinion.
Great to have you. Jerome Powell acknowledging a big spike in crypto transactions across Russia and Ukraine in recent days. But should this worry U.S. lawmakers, and are they already gunning for more regulation? We have Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse in the house here with our Charlie Gasparino next. Closing bell 9. Tesla. It has been a very volatile 2 weeks for cryptocurrency as investors attempt to determine the impact the war in Ukraine and Russia could have on the asset class. Bitcoin did rise over $44,000 per coin yesterday, but you can see right now it has fallen and it is now standing at 42,000 barely. It is also in lockstep with Ethereum and Litecoin, which are also dropping. One of the biggest questions U.S. lawmakers have is how Russia and its bad actors might be using crypto to skirt around the sanctions that have now been put in place on Russian banks and Russian people. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell fielding this question on Capitol Hill this morning. Listen.
Do you see the possibility, at least, of Putin or his oligarchs using digital payments and other alternative payment methodology to avoid these sanctions.
I saw that crypto transactions are spiking in Ukraine and in Russia. I think it really underscores the need to have a strong regulatory regime that permits appropriate activity, but that prevents inappropriate activity.
Listen, it's the same with the U.S. dollar. Appropriate activity, inappropriate activity. Joining us now on the set, CEO of leading enterprise blockchain company Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse. Yes, of course, Ripple, related to XRP. Brad would know a thing or two about this, along with Charlie Gasparino.
I know nothing. He knows everything.
I know nothing. What do you make of what Powell said? He kind of gave it to both sides.
What did he say, though? Did he say anything?
It's not entirely clear. By the way, I do want to start by just saying that I and the team at Ripple feel so strongly about standing with the people of Ukraine, and I just want to put that out there. Sure. But my comment as I listen to some of the things I hear out of Washington is just I fear that there's a lack of knowledge. There's a lack of information about how crypto really works. And I think it does a disservice to responsible actors like Ripple who are working with governments, with sanctions. Everything that is enforced from a sanction point of view through fiat currency, anything that Ripple does is enforced in the exact same way. And so there's no different level playing field. And I think in some ways I heard Senator Warren saying things yesterday that felt like it's holding crypto to a different standard and expecting, for example, a blanket ban of all crypto in some of these countries in a way that you can still use PayPal. You can still use these, some of these other things. And I don't think we should treat them differently.
Ripple is like Swift, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, Ripple's starting point, kind of our first use case for the technology, the blockchain technology and the digital asset XRP was to solve that cross-border payments problem.
Right.
Swift is quite antiquated, kind of designed 50 years ago. It's slow. It's expensive, but it is a choke point that the government's used to enforce sanctions. My point is nothing that Ripple is doing circumvents any of that.
So you're following the sanctions exactly? Like, for example, it's 8 banks, but a couple can still trade through it theoretically?
Correct. The sanctions are applied through what I'll call the choke points, the on-ramps and off-ramps. That's true for Swift. That's true for Ripple. Regardless of what I'll call just the plumbing of how things are moving, the choke points are the endpoints. So I think, when I step back and look at this, I think there is a lack of knowledge. I think people need to understand that crypto isn't this kind of black box. It's kind of back from when it was known as Silk Road. The industry has come a long way.
So an oligarch, or let's just say Vladimir Putin, couldn't finance tanks through Bitcoin.
Look, one of the things that people don't realize is there's just not enough liquidity.
Yeah.
Russia used to trade pre-sanctions $50 billion of cross-border kind of transactions per day. Crypto does not have anywhere near that. So, look, in the same way that somebody could be taking wheelbarrows of rubles or the Ukrainian currency across to Poland and things there are ways you could do that, but it's really not significantly dissimilar.
Why are they so obsessed with it then? It's so weird.
I think it's kind of clickbait. It's a hot item. I think people, it adds a relevance and excitement around some of these things, but I think people don't understand.
Well, we had spoken to Gary Gensler of the Securities and Exchange Commission. I know you saw that interview because we were emailing afterward about it, but he specifically tried to say that he wants to very much focus on what's a security and what is an actual token, a cryptocurrency. I feel like if that's the case and he's holding you to that standard, at some point he's going to have to go after Ether as well, because Ether and Ethereum are those two very similar paths, just like XRP and Ripple, are they not?
Look, I think that's absolutely true. I don't want to comment on what they should or shouldn't do. I think as it relates to Ethereum, my view is it's very clear Ethereum's a currency. It's very clear XRP is a currency, and that the SEC. I mean, he was interviewed yesterday. Gary Gensler was, or maybe it was even this morning, and commented that, hey, we're going to lose some cases. This is the definition of regulation by enforcement.
He was going to lose. You think he was saying he's going to lose your case?
I don't know what he was saying. But he did say, hey, we're going to lose some, and we're okay with that.
That's the definition. Where are you on the case? Let's get an update.
The quick update, on Monday was the last day of expert testimony, expert depositions, et cetera. And so the case continues to move forward. We're expecting some decisions from the court, sooner rather than later as it relates to a couple of decisions before the court. But look, it's moved slowly. I think Gary Gensler has continued to kind of go with a narrative that crypto is the Wild West. It's not the Wild West. Are there bad actors? Yes, there's bad actors in all parts of...
bad actors in money laundering and U.S. dollars.
Right. I found it fascinating from reading the documents for all the stuff they said about how bad it was that you did unregistered securities. They never say anything bad about your platform. Why is that? I mean, because
and of course, well, the irony there is, like, we were in the SEC's offices. I met with Chairman Clayton. I was meeting with commissioners. No one ever once said, hey, we think XRP is a security. And then they look backwards and say, now we think it's all a security. That's a hard argument.
Please come back. Brad Garlinghouse of Ripple. We are coming right back. Charlie, thanks to you. Asset Management Chief Macro Strategist Frank Rubinsky with $461 billion in assets under management. Frank, we have had an awfully volatile market today. And as we watch every single metric of it, whether it is stocks or the 10-year or crude oil, what is an investor to make of these moves? Each day they seem to be in a different direction.
Certainly. And Liz, thank you for having me back.
Of course.
I think what you're seeing is the acceleration of a new chapter in geopolitics and macroeconomics. Specifically, no matter what the outcome of this conflict, gone is the post-Cold War peace dividend that really energized the globalization movement. And that means that economics are not going to be the sole driving force of decisions going forward. You know, I think the forward to this book was written when Trump put on the China tariffs back in 2018. And now that force is really spreading and divisions will continue to grow. You probably wind up with this Western bloc and then this Russia-China bloc. And I think the theme of self-reliance is huge in that Europe's woken up to the reality that they can't outsource their security to the U.S., their manufacturing to China, and their energy to Russia.
Well, does that then mean that the smartest investors, hopefully a little bit longer term than just day-to-day tick-by-tick traders, should be going into great companies with a long runway for the future that leans toward tech, but not necessarily? I mean, maybe it's infrastructure names too, with really solid management, cash flow, but maybe have gone through lately a difficult time or gotten caught in the downdraft of the markets and are a lot cheaper.
Well, yeah, I do think there is this new secular trend emerging, and a lot of those kind of sectors and companies you talk about will be the beneficiaries. I think one